Anthropology Club. Thank you for coming. And I'm just going to introduce Mr. James W. Green, doctor. He got his PhD from UW. And he's teaching this quarter comparative study of death. He's published books of high acclaim, 2 of them in fact. Beyond the Good Death in 2008 is The Anthropology of Modern Dying and Cultural Awareness in Human Services. His research interests include comparative religion, death, Islam, Pakistan, and the West Indies, and phenomenology of religious experience. So we're looking forward to your lecture, and thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I did get my degree here, 1972.
That's what it says on the department chart.
That's exactly right. Got out of this department, and after 2 years of research in the West Indies on issues of labor migration, which was my earlier interest, taught for 5 years at the University of Wisconsin. Had an opportunity to come back here, so I did, and was here for about 40 years until I retired 3 years ago. And then, Janelle Taylor got a hold of me 4 or 5 months ago and said, "Would I please teach the death course in here?" So I said, "Yeah, they want to tell you to fill in the evening." So I said, "Okay, I'll do it in the evening division." About a week after I agreed to that, she said, "Would you consider doing it in the daytime as well?" So I came on full time this quarter. But when the quarter's over, it's back to retirement. Because I'm working on another book on a little different topic, and I need to continue with that and keep going. But I do like to keep my hand in the department, and I'm sitting on a couple of PhD committees, chairing one. So you never really walk away from it. You just change your relationship to the discipline or the department. Because what else would I do but get up in the morning, drink coffee, then wonder what to do the rest of the day? So you have to have something. This death course I've been doing, well, for some number of years, in fact. I suspect not close to 20 years, 15 anyway. I taught comparative religion. That was what got me to Pakistan. I was interested in Islam, and particularly folk expressions of Islam, and I'm still interested in that topic, and I keep up with it. But I got interested in the subject of the end of life because I noticed that most anthropologists who wrote about the end of life, very few made it the central topic of their monographs, of their books. What they would do is they would bury it. Bury this subject area is full of puns, unintended usually, but they would bury it in the last chapter of the book about religious rituals, say. And there would be a section on the end of life or beliefs about the spirit world or something like this. And it occurred to me that you could build a whole course just around end-of-life issues alone, and how would anthropologists do with that? So that's what I've done. And that did lead to the book that came out about 3 years ago called Beyond the Good Death, The Anthropology of Modern Dying, which is really a look at American death practices and how they compare to what goes on in other cultures and what makes us distinctive and weird. We have one practice which I think is exceedingly weird. I'll get to that in a minute, and so does the rest of the world. But then we do things that people in other parts of the world do as well. So we have our things going. So what I thought I would do is think about how might we think about end-of-life issues, recognizing that death always involves a body. The body is really kind of the central phenomenon. We have to deal with that. Some of you may have run across in your courses the name of a late 19th, early 20th century sociologist named Max Weber, who is sometimes, often in fact, quoted in comparative religion courses and some other kinds of things. He's famous for writing a book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, in the early 20th century. He was one of the early sociologists who reached well beyond his own field. He was almost an ethnographer. And Weber wrote about what he called the disenchantment of the world. He argued that in old Catholic Europe, you had, with the feudal system, you had rich traditions of belief, the universe populated by all kinds of spirits and angels. People believed the presence of deity was everywhere. They saw it all around them. But with the coming of Protestantism, he argued, the world became disenchanted because it became rationalized. He argued that Protestantism, which arose in the cities, the beginnings of cities in Europe in the 1600s, Protestantism dismissed a lot of the Catholic ritual, Catholic beliefs, the hierarchy of saints, these kinds of things, and substituted a highly rational way of looking at the world, because Protestants were very focused on this world, not the next one. They were very focused on organizing human activity in this world basically around market principles, which were based on rationality, economic rationality, rather than feudal principles of loyalty and patronage, in which God was the ultimate patron, and then there were sub-patrons, angels and saints and this kind of thing. So that an enchanted universe, Weber argued, became a disenchanted universe that was rationalized. That was the big argument. Now, there was a French anthropologist, early 20th century, named Robert Hertz. Hertz as in Hertz rental cars, with no connection. Robert Hertz, who was a student of Durkheim, and he disputed Weber's understanding of disenchantment. And he said, no, the universe really is enchanted, but in human cultures, but in a different way than it had previously been experienced. And we could think about that in a systematic way. Instead of thinking about quaint customs going on in different parts of the world, this is how they do something in Indonesia, this is something in West Africa, wherever, he said there is an underlying system in death practices everywhere that include a high dosage of enchantment, always, even in our own highly secular culture, we argue. Let me show you, I'll do a drawing here very quickly. This is the crankiest machine I ever saw. I can't believe it, but it is less than low tech. But let me just show you very briefly what his model was, and then I'm going to go into some of these examples of enchantment. I mean, this thing even chirps at you. That's really wonderful. But Hertz's model, it's very simple. Looks something like this. He said, in any given culture, there's a system to thinking about the end of life, and it can be thought of as a triangle which represented three kinds of relationships. So in this corner, you have the survivors of a death in the family or the community or something like this. And in this corner here, you have the corpse. C-O-R-P-S, you have the corpse. And so he argued that the base leg of any system of death practices in any culture starts out, really he talked about three relationships here. He was less interested in the corners than he was in the relationships. First is the relationship between the survivors and the corpse. So we're talking about a relationship here in which he argued that the customs and practices that go on here are symbolic of the status of the survivors in the community, the status of the person who is now dead, and of the relationship between these people here. And if you think about it, status relationships, we've got status relationships operating here. You think about it, the death of a president, the death of Princess Di, the death of Elvis is different than the death of a homeless person here in Seattle because of the status relationships that are going on.